Welcome to another episode of the Tapestry podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Froswá Drew, and today we're in a different facility. I'm so grateful to Girl Scouts of Northeast Texas for allowing us the opportunity to come in and try out their new podcasting space. And so again, Girl Scouts Northeast Texas, Jennifer, and Ashley, y'all are great. So again, welcome. I want to introduce to you an amazing human being, friend, colleague that I have been looking forward to interviewing. And so without further ado, let me introduce the amazing Dr. LauraLynn Jansen. I want to read her bio, and then we're going to get right into the conversation. And so Dr. LauraLynn Jansen is a published author, an innovator in sustainable leadership, and a cutting-edge illuminator in the field of coaching, program design, and implementation. Her capacity as a coactive coach and leader encompasses group facilitation with a highly interactive delivery system to impactful individual interactions. She's been a maven in the field of personal health and wellness for over 20 years and has over 5,000 hours of teaching and facilitation experience. Through her visionary determination, LauraLynn has developed programs for senior executives, members of the armed forces, highly injured nurses, and others struggling with demotivated lifestyles. She led the implementation of a Centers for Disease Control funded program focusing on diversity training, removing the barriers for healthcare providers nationwide. She also has been a consultant for the U.S. Air Force, Texas Department of Health and Human Services, and numerous nonprofit and healthcare facilities across the United States. Just over 10 years ago, she co-developed a 4-year curriculum addressing personal sustainability through an authentic embodied leadership for vulnerable youth. The tremendous impact of this lifelong leadership program is beating the national odds for foster youth. This program focuses on the roots of personal sustainability and also blending the philosophies of modern leadership with that of ancient yogic sages. It is a life leadership program with interpersonal and intrapersonal impact. All of LauraLynn's interactions aim to allow individuals the chance to discover the capacity of self to thrive inherent in all of us. LauraLynn, welcome to the show. I'm tired reading your bio, girl. I'm like, whoo.
And that's an old one. I've updated it. I should have sent you a new one.
It is so much more that I know you've done. I want to talk about when we first met. Because you were working on your dissertation and you were doing some incredible work with young people. And I got a chance to talk with the young lady that you were partnering with. So talk about this program that, I just mentioned that you were doing with youth and this amazing curriculum that has had such impact.
So that was with the Hershey group. And just to let people know, unfortunately, the pandemic kind of stopped that program. But we were working with foster girls out of the Los Angeles County area, and it eventually expanded into Las Vegas as well. And the amazing thing about this work is that the odds against foster youth is very high. So like 1 in 10 will complete high school, and 1 in 100 will complete college. And we were able to beat all of those odds through this kind of progressive program that built on their understanding of themselves and leadership development, and just it was all kind of intertwined. And it was not just mental activities, it was somatic engagement, there was ropes courses, there was improv, there was just all these beautiful things that got them out of their shell to understand themselves in a holistic way. So
it was amazing work, and I was honored to be able to just learn a glimpse of what you were doing. And at that time, you were also in the PhD program. Shout out to Antioch University, where we both attended. I love Antioch. I say I'm a poster child for them because of what it did for my life. But talk about your dissertation research.
So my research really, it was interesting that your podcast is called Tapestry, because really the thing that I focused on is a thread that's run through my whole life. And I was really curious about unraveling the mechanisms that create a humanizing experience for individuals. So I interviewed individuals from almost 13, 14 different heritages all over the world that all live with some form of social stigma. So anything from being transgender to a racial stigma to all kinds of different, some were adopted, all kinds of different stigmas in their societies. And I asked them, instead of what it felt like to be dehumanized, which was their common experience, I asked them when they felt humanized, what that experience was like. And yeah, the stories were just so beautiful. They were just so beautiful. I got to interview a Holocaust survivor. I interviewed a woman who was an ex-combatant for the Irish Republic Army, which is, if for those of you who don't know, that was that big war that happened in Ireland that split the country. Yeah, so there were a lot of amazing stories that came out of that. And then I used that to build my dissertation. And my next realm is to try to write a book out of that.
So what were some of the things that you learned out of that experience that you felt were things that made people human? I'm sure it was experiences like feeling connected to other people, but what were some of the other common threads that you discovered in your research with all these amazing folks?
Yeah. So the number one thing, so there were many subcategories to this number one theme, but the number one thing that made people feel humanized by another person was acknowledgement. So it could be anything from, for example, there was a woman who was indigenous to Mongolia, currently lives in Australia. And she told me that when she would open up the website for one of the local museums in Australia, and they had an acknowledgement on there to the Aboriginal people, even though she wasn't Aboriginal, that acknowledgement of that indigenous culture also made her feel like she was being humanized as an indigenous person. So that was kind of like on the macro level of acknowledgement, all the way down to when people would interact with someone in a way that they saw them as a human first. They didn't see them as a Black person. They didn't see them as a transgender person. They saw them just as a person, and they related to them in that way. And then the other two major categories was resonance and intimacy. And so really the best way to think about this one is that our default when we interact with each other is that we kind of begin to notice how we're different from each other. And in the resonance and intimacy, it was more like people were looking to discover how they were alike each other. There was ways in which they looked for that connective bond. You could call it almost empathy if you wanted to. That would be one way of it. And they were authentic in how they did that. And then the last one was people felt humanized when somebody was willing to hear their perspective. Maybe they weren't going to totally change their mind, but they were willing to listen, and they were willing to consider change, consider what something different than them was.
What did you learn about yourself? Because one of the things I know about a dissertation is people think it's always the writing and the research that you're putting together, but it's also a transformative experience for you.
Yeah.
And there are ahas that come out of that, both for the work and then also for you as a person. So what were, the ahas for you that this work provided you, but also what did it do for you as a person in examining your own humanity? How did it change or challenge you?
Oh, I think one thing that it was a finding of the research, but I don't think I really thought about it before in the same way. So when humanization happens, a lot of us think of it as like me humanizing another person humanizing me. We don't really think about how when that happens, it also could go internally. And so in hearing all of their stories, there was a way in which I became self-humanized. So some people call it the opposite, internalized oppression. A friend of mine calls it injected oppression. But what I really understood from this was that it's a ripple effect. And I could feel that in my own life by sitting and having these stories with them. And I could see it in their faces. I could see it in their bodies. Like I learned that somatically, the way in which we look at each other, the way in which we hold our bodies towards each other, that also. And that was not something, I guess I kind of understood it because I've been a somatic based person for a long time. But when I saw it like right in front of me, I really was like, wow, this work of all this work I've done around meditation and mindfulness in my body, it really matters. And I always knew that, right? But this, like, it's empirical research. Yeah, it shows it, right? Yeah. So that's just one example. But it was incredibly powerful, and it gave me hope. It gave me hope in a society that is just portrayed as so unkind.
Yeah. And I have so many questions. I'm trying to make sure that I'm asking everything because, a couple of things. One, what led you to want to do this kind of research on discovering the humanity behind two people? And then secondly, I think the thing for me is there's so much coming out on this somatic research and the body. When you were talking, the first thing that came to me was that new book about the body keeps score. Well, it's not so new, but that the trauma that we experience by being oppressed and being othered shows up in not just our interactions, but our bodies. And so talk about the somatic, because I know a lot of people don't know what that is. And so I'd be curious for you to explain to them, what is that and what drove you into this space to really dig deep about what makes us human, and that there is a commonality despite all the difference. There's so much we have in common.
Yeah. So regarding the soma, somatic soma, it means of the body. So in this case, what I found is different. And I didn't even, this wasn't part of my question. My question had to do around psychological elements. So everything that came out about physical appearance and physical presence wasn't prompted by me. They all offered it. And every single person spoke about it in some way or shape. So I think that's a really telltale thing about how we act. And I guess what I would say to the listeners is that, in your day, when you go about, just notice the different types of ways in which people interact with you and your body, and which ways feel like they're pulling you in and making you want to bring you close, and what are the ways that are pulling you out and pushing you away. So being, arms crossed, kind of leaning back away, a little bit more dehumanizing, a little more disconnecting, versus releasing the arms, leaning in, softening around the eyes. This is something I just noticed. I was in a online meeting of some kind, I can't remember, with people from all over the world. And I'm now watching for these cues. And when you first get on, everybody's kind of just like in their little boxes, right? On Zoom, and they're just doing their thing. But what was so interesting is that people got engaged from all over the world. There was like a softness that I saw come over their face when they were able to start talking about who they are in their lives and so forth. And that's a humanizing physiological experience that happens. So hopefully that answers the somatic part of it. What took me into this work is personal. I grew up in the Midwest, where I didn't see a person of another race until I was a senior in high school.
Ooh, wow.
And my grandparents had a Black family move in next door to them in southern Wisconsin. And I remember my grandfather saying something, and it just didn't make sense to me. I didn't understand, because I didn't see the people. I didn't know what they meant. They just had these things to say that weren't very nice. And then as I moved out into the world, and I became an activist, and my first piece of activism was around apartheid. I had moved to a big university town, Madison, Wisconsin, and I made friends with a dear, dear friend, who's still a dear friend, from Africa. And she explained to me about apartheid. And that was the beginning of me beginning to understand about power, about race. And this was in the mid 80s. So what my work has been ever since, again, that thread I talked about earlier. So I did social activism around apartheid. I was on the front of the HIV epidemic in San Francisco and Washington, D.C., two of the highest places. And I saw how people were dehumanized there. So there's I've been on the forefront of a bunch of queer rights as a queer person, seen a lot there that wasn't very pleasant. So for me, this work was very personal, because I was just so sick of seeing how people were getting dehumanized. And I wanted to know, if I'm a proactive person, if I want to create a positive impact in the world, what can I do to show other people that? And that's kind of what prompted me towards this. And I was listening to a talk of a woman. She had just come back from the Gaza Strip. This was about 3 years ago. And she was talking about how there were these people who were bringing together Palestinians and Israelis on the, in that kind of no war zone at that time, and trying to do this process called rehumanization. So they had obviously dehumanized based on their religious factors, and then this work was to try to get them to start having conversations to rehumanize. And that's where I kind of was like, can we back up from there even, and like figure out, like, if I want to be kind, if I want to be aware, if I want to be critically conscious, how can I do that? And so it was not an undoing, but it was like a proactive stance from the get-go, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah. It's interesting because, before we started the podcast, and I know this, but I don't think the audience does, you live in Germany.
Yes, I do.
And so how has it been with the context of, being dehumanized, and as you mentioned, being queer? What is the difference in a Germany and the US in terms of how people are treated? What have you noticed?
Lots. I feel safe. I don't, this is the first time in my life I've ever felt safe to hold my partner's hand in public. This is the first time I have ever felt safe to say I have a female wife. So, and I can't say it's like that in all of Europe, but there are definitely countries that I've got, like Iceland. They are off the charts. Portugal. Like, it's just, there's some places you go and it's just like, it's not a thing. It's not a thing at all, and I've just never lived. So I write about this in, I had given you a copy of my memoir, but actually when I was struggling with trying to understand who I was my senior year in high school, I attempted suicide because I had a feeling that who I was not right for society. And that was, I didn't even know the word gay. I didn't know any of those words. I had never heard them. I had no concept of what they were. The only thing I knew is I really thought Boy George was cool. And so, that's kind of where it started. And it's amazing now to be where I am in my life and see, and I've been a queer activist for a very long time, to see this beautiful new generation of breaking all the barriers between gender and what kind of people how we love. And, I feel like all the activism I've done over the last 40 years is like, there's something positive coming out of it. So
you mentioned the word hope. I mean, I'm hopeful because I look at this generation, the Z's, and how they buck all, norms and question. And it gives me hope that they are going to be the ones who really take us to the next level, and then recognizing the foundation that people like you have laid for them to be able to do this kind of work. So I'm like you, I'm hopeful, and I'm hoping that the day will come that people feel safe. It's sad that you can be in your home and not feel safe. And for you to have that level of security is something that, I wish that everyone would be able to experience.
Yeah, no, I do too. I wish all of my queer friends could come and live in Europe. I wish I didn't have to come back to the United States, to be honest. I'm just so comfortable here. And it's not just that. I mean, my value system, I've always been a recycler. I've always been a composter. I've always, my value system is very much aligned, much more with life here than in a lot of places back in the US. And, that's just me. I'm not saying one's right and one's wrong. It's just, I feel more comfortable here for multiple reasons. So,
but it goes back even to your research. You found a place that allows you to be the totality of who you are, that you can fully be human and be present and bring all of who you are into this space. Whereas you've been in spaces, and even the people that you've interviewed for your research who don't have that safety, that psychological safety, and
Yes,
sometimes it's
exactly.
even, you brought it up, sometimes it's the physical safety of, I
Yeah.
can't walk down the street and hold hands with my partner without being afraid of what's going to happen to me. That you found a place that allows you to be human. And
Mhm.
your research excites me because it gives people this framework to think
Mhm.
about, how do we treat others, and what does it really mean to move from othering people to really
Yes.
allowing people to show up in who they are and loving them and accepting them for who they are. And if they've been traumatized, how do we still build them and decolonize what has happened to them, in
Mhm. Yep.
essence? So
Yep.
I'm excited about it. I'm going to talk about this book. So everybody,
Okay.
look at this book. I want you to get it, but talk
Well,
about this.
there's no more copies for sale. I mean, they're all,
Oh, well,
yeah,
it's mine.
I'm
And
working on another edition, so they will be out eventually. I have one box left, so you'd have to contact me directly to get it.
so y'all contact LauraLynn to get this, but I want to talk about, I'm going to read a little bit about of the back of it,
Mhm.
and then I want you to tell more about what inspired
Okay.
you to write a memoir. But it says, Inspired to Live tells the life-affirming journey of LauraLynn Jansen's survivorship of lymphatic cancer and innocence diminished by rape. Her story demonstrates a woman who flourishes despite the subsequent mental and physical anguish of life. Body, heart, mind, and soul, the book's subsections, are a testament to her power of resilience. And so I want to talk a little bit about what prompted you to be so vulnerable to share, because that's a lot.
It is, and so the interesting about that version of the book, and why I haven't also put out the second version, is that when I wrote that book, I'm married to a person in the military. The Don't Ask, Don't Tell was still in place. So for people who don't know that, because so many people seem to not know, that was people who were serving that were gay in the military could not be out. And so people like me who were supporting and partners of those people, we were hidden. We had to lie over and over and over. So when I wrote that book, is if you read it, you'll see that there is no gender assigned to anybody I speak about, because I couldn't, for sake of my partner losing her job or anything else. And I don't use anybody's real name either. I give them caricatures instead, or something like that. So that's just something to understand. And there's a whole story about the overturning of the Don't Ask, Don't Tell that actually I kind of, in a backwards way, kind of did some activism to make it happen. So, but nobody was supposed to know. So the book, it covers my so when I was 20, I had Hodgkin's lymphoma. So I had a tumor that was quite large, and it was in between my heart and my lungs. I was a model in Los Angeles at the time, and then I had spread into my upper body, and I passed out. I was working modeling and in a record store, and I had passed out at the record store where I was working. They gave me a 50% chance of surviving. I went through intensive chemo and radiation, and this was still back in the day when they didn't really have a handle on what to do. And so I lost all my abilities to have children. Basically, everything was just like wiped out at the age of, by the time I finished treatment, I was 21. And it just kind of, it just changed my perspective on life completely. And then the other piece that you were talking about, I was raped at 16 by one of my first boyfriends. And then within 2 years, I think it was my first year in college, I was raped by a boyfriend's friend. And the reason I wrote those stories in there wasn't for the shock value, but more to let young women know that because somebody does something like that and it's not okay with you, it's not your fault, and it's not that it's okay. And like, as I said, I just really wanted young women to understand, or anybody to understand, if it doesn't feel right for you, then it wasn't right. No person has the right to have that kind of power over you when you're telling them no.
Exactly. You are so brave to even share that. And I'm being very serious, because for so many people, when they have experiences of violation,
Mhm.
there's shame that comes with that, and
I
guilt.
thought it's that's I thought that's I thought that's why I thought I was gay, was because of that. I thought, oh, does that just turn me off to men? You know, that's why I'm gay. So, and I went through intense therapy, but thankfully, I had this amazing therapist in San Francisco, Dr. Amy Cutler. She's amazing, um, and and she did somatic work with me. So she did drumming and awareness in my body and all these things. You know, it was almost 10 years later, like in the early 90s when I did that. But what was beautiful is that that work helped me heal not only the rape residuals, but also all the residual of the pain and trauma from the chemo and radiation and all of that. So it was very helpful.
And it's a lot to experience at that age when you don't have much of a point of reference, that you're trusting people, to do
Yep.
right and care
Yep.
for you. And that's so much to have to process with
Yep.
the cancer and the violation.
Yep.
And what advice would you give? I know in the book you talk about this experience, but what advice would you give to young women who are struggling with having so much happen at one time, or going through that type of trauma? What advice would you give to them to be able to get to a place of healing and restoration that you've experienced?
I mean, I think it's going to be individual. It's just, I think anytime people ask me questions about things like that, or like if somebody has cancer, like, a lot of people contact me because I'm now a very long-term cancer survivor. And my main answer always is figure out where they have the most faith and support them in doing that. So if they have faith in meditation, if they have faith in reading the Bible, whatever it is that soothes their soul and they have faith in, support them in going there into that comfort place, and hopefully that will help them build. For me, if I had not worked with Amy, I do not think I would have worked through it all. So I'm not going to say just a therapist, but the right kind of therapist. I mean, I had to find someone who really understood and could be really present with what was going on with me.
And I love the fact that you also incorporate the body work, because I don't think people understand the power of breathing and understanding how to
Mhm,
breathe differently,
mhm,
to understand that trauma lives in your body and in
mhm.
certain spaces of your body. So the fact that you had this approach that wasn't just one singular thing, that
Yep.
you were incorporating all of these different modalities to be able
Mhm.
to get through such a traumatic experience. I mean,
Well,
wow.
it's the whole well, holism, that holistic approach. And now the work I do around human-centered leadership, it's also holistic, because we're not just brains, we're not just hearts, we're not just bodies, right? We're all the things. We're all the things. And so when I do my work now, it's very much informed by all this past of me understanding, like, I learned because I incorporated all those things to be the person I am now. And so that's the same way that I work now with other people. And some people, they may not find it comfortable, but I got to tell you, I just worked with a bunch of managers in Washington. I'm not supposed to say, in a state agency, and I put in breathing and somatic awareness exercises throughout for this human-centered leadership program. And one of the things that was commented on in everybody's review afterwards was how much they appreciated that. So even if people say, "Oh, I don't know about that," they feel it when you present it, and if they engage in it, they feel it.
I know we're coming to our last couple of minutes, and I'm like, oh, there's so much more that I want to do, but I want you to talk a little bit about your practice. What are you doing now? When's the next book coming out? And how can people reach you?
I don't know when the next book's coming out. I'm getting ready to do another international move in the summer, so I'm not. Right now, I'm done with my PhD, and so I'm actually going to have some fun for the next couple of months and travel quite a bit. So I'm very excited about that. I am building a website right now, but really the best way to find me is through my Instagram, which is my name, LauraLynn, and then it says human. So LauraLynn, human. That's me on Instagram. But I do have a website coming out, and it's LauraLynnJ.com. And then what's next? So right now, I'm starting to consult with different agencies that want to bring a more human-centered approach to how they lead in their settings. So I've worked with some government agencies. I've worked with a couple different modalities with people online, in person. I've been presenting online all over the world around this research. I'm also creating a certificate. I'm hoping that Antioch's going to approve it and create a CEU in human-centered leadership that I can provide to people, and then they can get CEUs. So that's one of the other things I'm working on. And I'm writing several articles right now. So I'm presenting at multiple conferences. So that's what's happening at the moment.
I am so happy for you and the work that you're doing, that you are living your best life. And at some point, I got to come to Europe and hang out with you.
Well, it has been the next 2.5 months because I'm moving back in August.
You're moving back to the U.S.?
Yes, at the end of August.
Okay,
yeah, we have to
go. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
but when you're ready to come to Europe, I can give you suggestions.
Excellent. Okay. Well, we will definitely be in touch because I love keeping up with you and what you're doing. You're such a phenomenal person. And so I'm honored that we were able to connect while you're working on your PhD. And I hope people will reach out to you to be able to tap into your brilliance and be able to get the coaching and the leadership development that you offer. So please go to the Instagram and then look for the website that will be coming very soon. LauraLynn, thank you for being on the show. You are a rock star. And I just want to say thank you.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you so much. It's so good to see you.
It's good to see you too. And team, this is another episode of the Tapestry Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Froswá Booker-Drew. And if you enjoy episodes like this, continue to check us out. You will learn so much from these amazing women that I have the opportunity to interview and learn lessons from their journeys that can help you along yours. So take care and thanks for tuning in.